Brought to you by ConcordiaTheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Lectionary Kickstart. We're sparking your thoughts for Sunday as you plan your sermon or teaching lesson. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordeleau, here with Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Napsker. They're both professors of homiletics here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. You can hear all about us in our introductory episode, but trust me, they are pretty good preachers. All right, let's get started. David, where are we in the church year?
We are the third Sunday of Easter, the time in which the church is celebrating the resurrection and life of Christ and the life of Christ's people.
And what are the texts this week, Peter?
The texts are taken from Acts chapter 9, Revelation 5, John 21, and Psalm 30.
As always, I ask each of you to tell me which text you would choose to preach about. To determine who goes first this week, so in the gospel reading, Jesus comes and he talks to Peter, right? Now, Peter's name was Simon, but he changed it to Peter. But now, in these readings, he's calling him Simon, son of Zebedee. So it's like his long version of his name. So it's a switch of nicknames. Is there a nickname that drives you crazy?
There was a guy in college, a good friend of mine, I played basketball, called me Petey.
Ooh.
And it's the kind of thing that I actually kind of liked it from him, but from anyone else, I would hate that.
All right.
Yeah,
David?
People called me Schmitty, and as long as you've got the M, I'm okay, right? But, so I thought it was okay. Yeah.
All right, Schmitty, great. My name's Jessica.
Did you have one that you hated?
Jessie. Never
Jessie.
call me that. I'm pretty much just always Jessica. Don't call me Jessie. Well, I think you disliked your nickname more, Petey. So you get to go first. You win. You get to
Thank
go
you,
first.
Jesse. All right, so I'm sticking with Revelation. I started it last week, and I'm sticking with it again. And we talked about it quite a bit last week, but I'll just remind us what I'm thinking here, and that is that Revelation is this strange book of apocalyptic literature, very image-rich, very evocative. You can't read it like you read the Gospels. The Gospels are kind of like a photograph, where the book of Revelation is like a stained glass window, and so you kind of just have to marvel and wonder and look at it and experience it. And so when you're preaching on these texts, I would not try to say what every single orange and red triangle in a stained glass window means. Instead, I would help people step back and look at this image and then help them see their Lord Jesus and their life in Him in light of this image.
I love the idea of experiencing wonder.
Yeah.
Partly at the strangeness, but then you move from the wonder of the strangeness to the wonder of the revelation of Christ and the meaning of His resurrection. That's really great.
And this is really where, it's pretty famous that Luther was pretty down on Revelation because he said it was hard to find Jesus in it because it's so strange and fantastical. But this is where, if you're going to read the book of Revelation, it seems to me like it might be helpful to preach on it so that you help people see it, help people see Jesus in this revelation.
We talked about this more in the previous episode, so listeners, if you didn't listen to last week, do it, because we talked about how those of us in the pew might misinterpret Revelation, and how I've had friends who want to stay true to God's Word, and to them that means everything is literal. And if you preach that any of it is symbolic, then you're saying it's not God's Word, instead of talking about the different literature types and how you would faithfully read them differently because they were intended differently. So that was super important last week, and I think you should remind us of that at the beginning of the sermon.
Good. So, again, like I'm suggesting, an image out of each text to kind of focus attention because there's so much to see. And last week, the image was the keys that Jesus was holding. This week, I want to draw the image from, let's start, Jessica. Would you read verses 8 to 10?
And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth."
All right, now even in those few verses, you've got a bunch of images. You've got the scroll, You've got the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders. They're holding these harps. You've got
and golden bowls of incense, which is going to be hard.
Yeah,
to hold both of those.
Harps are big.
They are. I know.
So you've got all these different images. If you back up and read the previous verses, there's a lot more about the scroll. Frankly, when I first looked at this text, I thought I'm going to have the scroll be the image, and then I thought about it a little bit more, and I kind of went away from that because of the verses that you just read, and I'm going to ask you to read 2 more. Would you read 11 and 12 too, Jessica?
Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing."
Okay, so the image is starting to come into focus now, but I'm going to ask you to read one more verse, verse 13.
And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever."
Okay. You got the image?
The Lamb.
No.
Oh!
The angels?
The throne.
Partially, not the throne. The image is the choir.
Ah.
All right? So I want you to notice in those verses what we read. In verse 8, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down, each holding the harp, and they sang a new song.
Okay.
And then he gives us part of their lyric. And then verse 11, I looked and I heard around the throne the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads, thousands of thousands. Now the choir's getting bigger. Now you've got not just the 24 elders, but you've got the angels. And then look what happens in verse 13.
Right. Every creature.
Every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and all that is in them saying. And so you've got this choir that
keeps
growing,
building.
that keeps
I
building.
love it.
Okay.
I love it.
And so I think this is a really cool image to work with because I think it captures really well the Christian and frankly the creation's response to its resurrected Lord. And so the image I have is almost like, you guys know the musical Les Mis?
Sure do.
Les Miserables. There's that favorite song toward the end, One Day More, where you've got the different people sing and they all come in with their part, and by the end they're all singing it together.
Right.
Yes.
And it's just this, I can't listen to that ever without just getting goosebumps because of the growth of the choir,
well, and that's a real typical pattern in musicals, right? That there are these ensemble numbers that slowly move until suddenly it's like the entire world is singing, and that's a beautiful image.
And what I like about that especially, and what I like about the way this text pictures this growing choir, is that in those musicals, whatever musical is your favorite pick, you've got different voices singing different words, but it all fits together.
Holds together, right.
And so you could look at these 3 different choir pieces, and you notice, look at verse 9. Worthy are you to take the scroll, to open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. So you've got kind of this one version, one verse of the choir with these 24 elders. And then in the next one with the angels, they're saying, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. So it's not exactly the same, but it fits well, to receive power and wealth. And then every living creature, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb, these all fit together. They're like layers in I don't know I'm sure there's a musical term for that, where you stack or something like that.
Right, yeah.
But I love imagining the Christian and the church's response to Easter as this growing choir.
It's sad because like at Christmas, often at the candlelight service, right, you'll sometimes have the choir process into once in Royal David City, and then they'll kind of circle around the nave, and so that the congregation is surrounded by the choir singing, and then the candles are lit, and then everybody's singing. So but we don't do that for Easter, right?
Yeah.
And yet you're showing that actually would be something. I mean, it'd be fun to kind of work with the music director, the worship team, whatever, and try to think, is there some way we can create this moment in worship where we move from a solo voice to a choir to the entire congregation? That would be fun.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And so, of course, now this is the image driving the sermon, and you think, okay, well, what am I going to preach? Now, the heart of the message is essentially what makes these people all sing, and that is the Lamb. You could use the language from verse 9, who was slain by his blood. He ransomed people for God from every nation, and so that could be your gospel proclamation as you help people reflect on what the church has been doing ever since. I like there too that it's every language, every nation, every tribe, and so you've got this choir of voices from different contexts, singing in different notes, but we all who bear the name of Christ, who've been raised with Him in our baptism, we all sing this praise to Jesus, and so I think you could easily have the gospel centered by directing people to the one about whom these people are singing.
Peter, I remember you telling me about a trip you took to Germany, I think it was, where there were people singing in Farsi. Was that right?
I didn't actually hear it, but
okay.
We were told about these Afghani and Iranian immigrants who are, being baptized into Lutheran churches, and they're singing the same kinds of things that we sing in our services, but they're in Farsi. They're in a different language. And what's really cool about that group is, you can't just translate English words and kind of English tunes with Farsi. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And so you kind of have to let them sing in their own heart song. And to us, it might sound really odd to have people singing different languages, different tunes, different whole different sounds, but you imagine hearing it from God's perspective,
right?
And all of these different people singing in different ways, singing to the Lamb who was slain and who has ransomed us all.
And to me, it's kind of like they have finally discovered what their music was supposed to be about. I mean, this is the purpose of your music, is to sing praise to God. Yeah. And I just love that, just the variety of voices and languages all confessing the same thing. It's a beautiful image.
And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I got to this choir image is that, you read the stuff about what's the scroll and who are the elders, and all this stuff just gets really convoluted in terms of trying to match up this stuff. And I actually don't think that's necessarily what John's actually given us in the Revelation. It's more this bigger picture. You step back, and then you see, we all understand singing, and we can understand the bringing together and the growing of a chorus. And so I'd love to highlight that, and then invite your hearers to join in the song, and maybe even having something like you mentioned earlier, David, kind of a growing choir later on in the service or something like that.
Cool.
Can you think of a way that there could be a children's message that would go with this, Jessica?
That's a fun idea. You could do something as simple as a canon, like a chorus, if you sing them in a round. Right. So you're at different words at different points. You could pick one that they might know, like row, row, row,
right.
boat.
Yeah.
And say, we're singing different parts of the same song together.
So have an activity that helps them see what it's like to participate in group song in different ways.
Yeah.
It would be really cool, and maybe it's too late to do this because it doesn't come out soon enough, but if you had... You taught the kids like a song in the children's message, and you had already taught the choir a version of that song, and then after the sermon, you'd invite the kids to come back up and sing, and then have adults start to join them, and have the whole congregation join in. I mean, that kind of experience of this thing could be really neat.
Cool. That's great. Thank you, Peter. What about you, David?
Oh, I'm going to go with the gospel reading. I love the first weeks of Easter because they always focus on the visitations of Jesus, the appearances of Jesus. And I know next Sunday will be the Good Shepherd Sunday, which is wonderful, but I would kind of like to just have an Easter season where every Sunday you have another visit from Jesus because they're beautiful.
I actually did that one year
in
the
did you?
parish. I took the first half of the lectionary readings, and then I scrapped the second half, and we read all of the resurrection appearances
I
afterwards.
love that.
And it was really neat. What it did is it gave people a much fuller view of the post-resurrection account.
Right.
Because they could put it all together at once.
Right. And so I guess so Jessica, just as a way of starting to talk about this, if you could read the first verse.
After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way.
Okay, so the words again and in this way. They remind us that there wasn't just one revelation of Jesus after the resurrection, but there were many, and they weren't all the same. And it just kind of makes me wonder, why did Jesus do so many? I mean, he could have done one and done, right? And had everybody who needed to be there. He'll tell Thomas what Thomas needs. He tells Peter what Peter needs. He gets it all done and just did it once. Or he could do it the same way each time, in which case now we have kind of this way of doing things because this is, but instead Jesus is just popping up.
Well,
right?
and he doesn't just show up and then stay with them.
Right.
He shows up, but then he goes away.
And he goes away.
And then he shows up again, and then he goes away.
He comes back, he makes them breakfast. He
I
comes
know.
back later, and they're fishing.
I
We
know.
lived with him for days and days. It's actually him. I think that would be really comforting.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I like about this text, but I like it when you hear this text as one of many appearances of Jesus. And here's kind of why I like it this way. I have a friend who recently lost her mother, and I was over there. She was on the porch outside with the dogs, and she came in and she said, you know what? She said, it was so weird. I was out there, I was thinking about my week, and I thought, oh yeah, I've got to go visit Mom. And then she said, and then I just had to stop because I realized, no, Mom's dead. And for her, the death of her mother meant that patterns had changed, and she couldn't be in conversation with her mother, visiting her mother, doing all of these things that she interacted with her mother. And so part of her grieving process was coming to a realization that her mother was gone and would not be physically present with her again, and so she had to change her patterns of life and her patterns of thinking. And this is what part of me delights in about these resurrection appearances, because I think Jesus is trying to help us grieve the right way by recognizing that he's still present with us even though we don't see him, that he keeps appearing. So like in a process of grief, your loved one has died and they're never appearing to you again, and you slowly learn to live without their presence in your life. And Jesus is helping the disciples kind of grieve his death in a different way because it's a death and resurrection. And so now they're coming to terms with the fact that this one who died is alive and is present and is ruling over all things. And so he's sometimes he goes through doors, other times he is walking along the road and he appears to you, another time he's making some food on the shore and he waves to you. I mean, it's just like they're needing to become accustomed to living in this world not as if Jesus has died and is no longer around.
Yeah, not as if he's died and no longer around, and also not as if he's risen and always present the way he used to be.
Right.
So you're opening this space for kind of a new conception of what it means to be present with Jesus.
Right. And so I see him cultivating an awareness of his presence that is different from when we were disciples of him, walking with him for 3 years. That he's still present, but it's in a very different way, right? And it takes, to comprehend that, because the only experience we have had of death is of death of people who don't return. right? And the death of Jesus is different because he's the first fruits. And now we've got this risen Lord who is present but not seen in our lives. And I think part of me sees these many visitations as slowly awakening us to this new reality of a...
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, Jessica. You've worked a lot with youth. And, sometimes you go on like some sort of retreat or a weekend or something, or have an event that's really meaningful, and people talk about, feeling more in the presence of God or something like that. And then other times where the feeling of God's absence is very strong. And I'm wondering if that's the case, if young people, or maybe not just young people, go through this ebb and flow of feeling like God is present and feeling like he's absent, if something like this could be a helpful way for them to just think of Jesus' presence in terms that are not just always here or always gone.
Oh, that's great, right? That's wonderful. If you base your faith on when it feels real, then it's going to go up and down if you're tired or not that day, or if you're hungry, right? Who knows how you feel? But if you know that your faith is real because God gave it to you at your baptism, it's different than having to feel it every day. Yes, that's so good. And you can talk about the disciples. When he would come back, they were so excited. That verse when Peter saw him, he put on his shirt and jumped out of the boat. He's like, oh, he's here, he's back. We don't know how long he's going to be here. I'm going to get there right away. No, that's great. It will help them understand that it's okay. If God seems absent, he's not really absent, but it might feel that way sometimes.
And the thing that's beautiful is that with his appearances, he's always setting things right. He's always bringing things to a restoration. So with Thomas, we saw how he set things right with Thomas. In this one, he sets things right with Peter, right? To the disciples on the road to Emmaus, he opens their mind to understand the scriptures. With Mary, it's just got, appearance after appearance after appearance. Not only does Jesus show up, making us aware that he's living and present even if we're not seeing him, but he shows up to set things right. And so he still is active in the world, putting things right as we await for the final consummation. And so I guess for me, as I look at the text, those two things of Jesus that shape the way we live with a Lord who has died and risen are that he is making us aware of his presence in our life, whether we see him or not. And when he's present, he's here to set things right.
Yeah, the setting things right is interesting because sometimes the setting things right requires that a few things change too.
Right, yeah.
So there's both law and gospel, kind of good news and kind of a challenge there. I've always found it just interesting that almost all these resurrection appearances in the Gospels, they don't recognize him. So
yeah,
Jesus, verse 7, Peter says, it's the Lord. And then he jumps in. But then in verse 12, none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. So there's this weird, he's recognizable but not. And I think there's maybe a connection there in terms of recognizing God's presence today too.
Yeah, well, this one is particularly beautiful because he's doing a mirror of the call, right? So in I think it's Luke 5 is when Peter has a miraculous draught of fish, and that then leads to him dropping their nets and following Jesus. And now we have another miraculous draught of fish, and it's right in that moment as that thing is happening again, that happened once, that John turns to Peter and says, it's the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of this memory that when Jesus arrives, these memories of how he has been among us before are reactivated, and we begin to see his presence in our lives again.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Sure,
Jesse.
That's all for today. You can find more resources for your next step of planning at concordiatheology.org. We have a lot of other free, awesome resources there for you. You should check it out. You can also find more episodes of Lectionary Kickstart and our other podcast, Tangible Theology Learned and Lived, at concordiatheology.org. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordolo. Join us next week here at Lectionary Kickstart, when Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Napsker will spark your thoughts for next Sunday. to go first.
Thank you, Jesse.
Don't call me Jesse.